What's going on, Notre Dame fans? Mike Singer from blueandgold.com with our beat writer, Tyler Horka. Spring practice, if you can believe it, it's really just a couple weeks away from the start date. And blueandgold.com and, of course, our YouTube channel here will have a ton of coverage of spring practice. But we got to do some previews of spring football. And in this video, Tyler's going to give 4 spring storylines. Before we dive into it, make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video, subscribe to our channel if you have not yet, and go to blueandgold.com. Sign up for our premium subscription on our website, just $1 for your first year of everything Notre Dame athletics coverage. Now, Tyler, I'll just give it away what the first one is. It's the quarterbacks. That's got to be the biggest storyline. You had your bridge year of Jack Cohn, that Jack Cohn being the bridge from Ian Book to whoever this quarterback is. That's definitely the top storyline.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting because obviously everyone was interested in what Jack Cohn looked like in practice, especially fall camp last year. How's he throwing the ball? What's he going to look like once these games start up? But I think there was also a lot of interest in Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine because they knew as we sit here today in March of 2022, this was going to be storyline number one. How do those two guys look in a competition? Because let's face the facts. Last year, you could try to drum up a competition between Jack Cohn and Tyler Buckner, but Jack Cohn was brought in to start 13 football games, and that's exactly what he did. This year, who knows? Is Tyler Buckner going to start 13 games this year? Will Drew Pine have to spell him at some point, like it looked like Jack Cohn was going to have to be spelled last year? This spring football session is all about how those two guys look. And I mean, like I said, Tyler Buckner was kind of under a microscope last year. Now he's under the most intense microscope that exists because everyone is going to want to know, how is he throwing? How is he running? How is he, standing in the pocket? It's everything this spring. So that's definitely number one.
Thinking from a fan standpoint, I think Notre Dame fans, what will be music to their ears is reports that Tyler Buckner's killing it at spring ball. Like that's what Notre Dame fans want to hear. I love Drew Pine. I'm higher on Drew Pine than most, but I just feel like Irish fans, if it's Pine who is the quarterback, the ceiling just seems a little bit lower than that. Tyler Buckner, who's about 6'1" and a half. It's probably going to be about 220, 225 by the start of this fall. Just seems like Buckner gives you a little bit higher of a ceiling. Would you agree there?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't really have consummate backups in college football at the quarterback position because these guys move so much, transfer. If they're not going to start, they want to transfer. But that's what Drew Pine is to me. It's okay, if Jack Cohn went down last year, Pine could come in, and he did. Wisconsin and Cincinnati, we saw it. If Tyler Buckner gets roughed up a little bit, I think Drew Pine's going to be just fine. Maybe not the same level as Tyler Buckner, but he could play college football at this level.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tyler Buckner is a mobile quarterback who, I mean, if he's the starter, they're going to use his legs a lot. So, I mean, obviously you don't wish an injury on anyone, but I think you could forecast that as a possibility. Okay, spring storyline number 2, Mr. Horka.
Flipping sides of the ball, obviously, Notre Dame has a new defensive coordinator this year. It's Al Golden, just coached the Cincinnati Bengals linebackers in the Super Bowl. And I think the storyline kind of writes itself. Marcus Freeman was the defensive coordinator last year. We all saw what that defense looked like and a lot of different schemes, a lot of different things that Marcus Freeman threw out there. The spring session is going to help us answer how much of those things are still intact. Does Notre Dame line up the same way? Because, I mean, there was a little bit of a switch from 4-3. There were some 3-4 looks, obviously some dime thrown in there. Like I said, Marcus Freeman did a whole lot. What does Al Golden want to do as the defensive coordinator? And how much, like I said, does this resemble a Marcus Freeman defense, or is it going to look completely different? Is it going to look like an Al Golden defense, which you'd have to go back a little bit. It's been a minute since he coached an entire defense he was the head coach at Miami, but he was at Temple as well, and he's been a defensive coordinator at Virginia in his time as well. So it's been a minute since Al Golden's done this. I'm curious to see what the Notre Dame defense looks like.
It felt like in that last time, I believe it was last time Marcus Freeman was made available, he kind of started by saying we needed someone to kind of come in here and not overhaul it. But then he said, like, it is Al Golden's defense. So I agree with you. What's kind of that middle ground there? Good stuff. Spring storyline number 3.
Yeah, we're going to go back to the offensive side of the ball for these last two. And number 3 is going to be the running back situation. Notre Dame had the same running back starter for the last 2 years, Kyron Williams, a really good one. if you guys are into the NFL Combine, definitely look at him this week because I'm sure he's gonna be one of those guys that puts up some numbers where Notre Dame fans, especially college football fans and pro football fans across the country, are going to be like, "Whoa, Kyron Williams is doing this." So you got to replace a guy like that now. And I know Chris Tyree's been at Notre Dame for a couple of years, and he looks like 1A, but Logan Diggs, rising sophomore, looks like a very viable 1B. And to me, the spring session might answer a question of, can Logan Diggs kind of transition into a 1A and make Chris Tyree a 1B? And then does that shuffle Chris Tyree out to the slot a little more than we've seen him? Or does Notre Dame try to get him involved in ways that aren't traditionally running back type of ways to get the balls in his hands? So that's definitely really interesting to me, is what does that dynamic look like between those two guys who appear to be the clear 1 and 2 running backs on the depth chart?
Is it 4 scholarship running backs? You got Estime, Diggs, Tyree, and then the incoming freshman Jadarian Price. I
Mhm.
mean, if it's me, thank God it's not. But if it is me, Diggs is my lead back, in Tyree, and Mike Goolsby touched on this in our show on Monday. Tyree might have more touches than Diggs, though. If Diggs has 12 carries, Tyree might get something like 7 carries here, and then 4 catches, a couple in the return game, maybe some jet sweep type stuff. So that's something I'm interested to see. And then Estime, gets a few carries in there as well. Okay, wrapping up with number 4, Chancey Stuckey time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's surprising that this isn't a number 2 or maybe even a number 1, just because how much people like to talk about it. Number 1's always going to be the quarterbacks, though, and then I think that coaching dynamic that we talked about on defense deserves to be number 2. But here we are talking about the Notre Dame wide receivers again. It's March. Spring practices are right around the corner. Everyone's going to want to know who's catching the ball. Last year it was, how does Kevin Austin Jr. look? And he looked really good in the practices that we got to cover, especially when I was here in the fall. He's not here anymore. So now it's going to be, does Deion Colsey look like a true boundary receiver? How is he catching the ball on the outside? Does Braden Lenzy look fast? Does he look healthy? Is he going to be the guy that everyone wants him to be, maybe even a little better than this past season? And then you have Lorenzo Styles, of course. He's going to start in the slot. Those look like your 3 starters right now, but obviously you're interested to see how Joe Wilkins comes back from a knee injury. And I know he's probably not going to be a full go in spring, and neither is Avery Davis is definitely not going to be a full go in spring. So that kind of opens up the floor for a guy like Jaden Thomas, who I've talked about time and time again in the receiver core. He's a rising sophomore, hardly played last year. Is he a guy that can break out in the spring and break into the fold, if you will? I think Notre Dame needs to have more of a true rotation at receiver because, I mean, Braden Lenzy played about like 95, 96% of the snaps in the Fiesta Bowl. That's not going to cut it. Somebody needs to come in and spell him. So let's see what these other Notre Dame wide receivers have.
So for the spring, and if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm wrong, here are your healthy scholarship receivers: Jaden Thomas, Lorenzo Styles, Deion Colsey, Matt Salerno. 4? Is that right? 4, because you have Tobias Merriweather. He won't get here till the summer. Wilkins is out. Davis is out. Wait, 5. I think it should be 5. Thomas, Styles, Colsey, Lenzy, Salerno. So yeah, and
Yep.
Salerno, of course, was a walk-on. So 5.
Right.
Um, Man, yeah, the numbers there are pretty thin. So that'll do it for this video talking spring storylines. Again, make sure you hit the thumbs up. And then on Friday, we'll be back with another video talking about some breakout candidates. So make sure you catch that as well.